M&A Advisor. Very pleased to have Richard Martin, Senior Director at Merrill Corporation with us. Richard, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Tell us a little about Merrill Corporation and your role with the company.
Sure. Merrill Corporation specializes in the handling of secure financial information and allowing for collaboration. My role at Merrill is I'm the global lead for M&A, which basically means that I'm responsible for helping to develop our products to service our customers in the M&A environment, as well as discussing topics that help improve the overall M&A process.
And speaking of discussing topics, you were on a panel today here at the summit talking about tech and changes in tech, cracking the code specifically. So let's talk a little bit about open source software.
Sure. I've discovered it's a really fascinating topic. I think a really important one because it represents not only a new development paradigm, or not so new, but relatively new development paradigm, but also it has, I think, some significant impact on transactions, in particular valuation. Open source software essentially is a peer-based development model. I think a good example would be Firefox. There's the benefits of it, and there's I think a really interesting quote from, it's called the Linux's law, is basically that the more eyes you have, and this is a paraphrase, but the more eyes you have on the code, the more likely you'll find bugs and fix them. And so essentially speaking, it's sort of opens up development to everybody. And of course, you're going to have different people who are going to spot certain elements that they can maximize, utilize themselves, or fix. So it's a really interesting way to, I think, cost-effectively develop software and also to improve its functionality.
Okay, you mentioned the benefits, more eyes on it, of course, a good thing. But what about the risks?
Well, there are definitely some risks inherent to it because it's open code, it's available to everybody. The risks are, one, you don't necessarily know who's using the code or how they're using it, so that's a risk. Two, realistically, there's probably a fair amount of open source code in any individual company's software development. The other two models of software development are sort of proprietary, the company does themselves, or they outsource. But in today's environment, I think most software code contains 50–60% open source coding. So the risk there is, do you even know that you have open source coding in your software? How do you identify that? Are you sure it's entirely yours, yet you can use it? Is it totally secure? There are many number of areas that we have to explore to make sure that people can ask the right questions to utilize open source software effectively, safely, and to maximize evaluations of their companies.
Okay, I'm going to start at 101, I think, right here. Okay. How do you know if you have it?
That's a very interesting question. I think it requires a fair amount of due diligence, looking into your code and understanding how it was developed. So it's a tricky question.
Yeah, and so what do you see moving forward? I mean, technology is changing at a breakneck speed. So what do you see in the future as far as coding?
I see continued use of open source software. I see it growing dramatically. I think that the thing that will change is that people's understanding of it will improve dramatically, and its use in terms of in terms of valuing the company's software product or the company overall will increase.
How widely used is it right now?
It's pretty much ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I think that, and that's the challenge. It is very widely used. Most people, or many people, don't necessarily know that it's being used. So I would say that open source software is ubiquitous at this point. We're talking 80% potentially. The question is do you know what you're using, how it's being used, and if it actually is the right thing for your organization.
Increasing the literacy. So what would
Correct.
be your advice for any company who wanted to find out more information about this and really get on top of it?
Take it seriously. Okay, take it very seriously. Spend the time to delve into it. Find partners that can work with you to help you identify risks and benefits. But most importantly is to start asking the questions. Do we have it? Are we using it? How we're using it? And is it safe?
Richard, great insight. It was wonderful having you with us today.
Thank you very
so
much. Appreciate it.